Exile. What does it mean to be exiled? It's not just about leaving your home or your country, really. It's even a place that holds memories that you once knew. Exile is the feeling of being pulled apart, as if something inside you doesn't belong anymore. It's the moment when you realize that the world you thought you knew doesn't recognize you anymore, and perhaps you don't recognize yourself either. It's about being displaced, not only in a physical sense, but in a mental, emotional, or even spiritual one. We think exile is a place, but what if it's not a place at all? What if exile is a space? A space between who you are and who the world tells you to be. In Persepolis, Marjane Satrapi captures exile not just as something that happens to someone else, but something that happens to you, to your mind, your soul, your very essence, really. Marjane leaves Iran, yes. She leaves the country, she goes home, but it's more than that. She leaves behind a version of herself that only exists there. And now she's left with a question. Who am I if I'm not from where I was born? Where do I belong when the world can't fit me into a neat little box? Exile, in the way it's presented in Persepolis, is like a fracture, a sharp sudden break in your life. You're no longer part of the world you once knew, and yet you're not fully accepted in the world you've entered. The weight of that fracture doesn't just sit in your body, it sits in your mind. How do you reconcile with a world that doesn't understand the person you were, while trying to figure out who you can be in a place that doesn't fit you? And yet, here's the irony of exile. It makes you more yourself. It also makes you less of who you thought you were. Marjane's exile forces her to confront a version of herself that isn't entirely Iranian anymore, but not fully Western either. She becomes something new, an amalgamation of cultures, experiences, and struggles that no one can define for her. Exile isn't a singular event, it's a slow realization, it's a perpetual state of flux. And there's just such a strange beauty in that, because when you're in exile, you have the freedom to become, to carve yourself out of the nothingness. That is the paradox of exile. You leave everything you've ever known, but in doing so, you're forced to face yourself in a way you've never had before. The world you've left behind is no longer there to define you. You no longer have the luxury of being shaped by the expectations of others. Instead, you must learn to shape yourself. This is what makes exile a coming-of-age story for Marjane. It's not only about losing your country, it's about losing the safety of being defined by others. When you step out of the box they've placed you in, you must create a new one for yourself. But how do you build an identity when all you have are fragments of who you once were? Exile makes you question everything. Who am I if I'm not my family? Who am I if not my culture? Who am I if not the place I come from? And perhaps more terrifying, who am I when I realize that the world might never fully accept me for who I am? And here's where exile flips the script. What if you are the only one who can decide who you are? What if exile and its painful disorientation is actually the key to self-discovery? When the world has no place for you, you are free to make one for yourself. Marjane's journey teaches us that exile is not just a punishment, it's a revolution, a personal revolution, where you take the broken pieces of your identity and mold them into something new. In the end, Marjane finds her own voice, not because the world accepted her, but because she accepted herself. Think about this a lot. About exile, not just as a physical state, but as a mental and emotional one. Know what it feels like to be in between cultures, between expectations, between the person I thought I was and the person I'm becoming. Exile for me isn't just about leaving a place. It's about living in the gaps, the space between who I am and who they think I am. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out where I belong, and I've realized something important. Maybe there's no place to belong anymore. Maybe the exile is the point. The beauty of exile is that it strips away everything that isn't really you, and what's left is raw and filtered and free. So, exile isn't just about leaving behind, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be. So what's the point of exile? It's not about where you've been, it's about who you are when you've been everywhere, and yet nowhere at all. Exile is the space between who you were and who you are becoming. Maybe, just maybe, the space is where you find the truth of who you really are.